From the latest on transportation to a life lesson from a local space legend, tonight a quarterly update on the stories we've brought you in depth. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. As we begin our fourth season on What Matters, we want to start by thanking you for your support of our broadcast. Tonight we bring you a quarterly update on some of our recent programs. We're committed to keeping you up to date on transportation in Hampton Roads as well. Governor Bob McDonnell wants to spend nearly $4 billion over the next 3 years on road improvements in Virginia, saying there's no better time to get a deal on road construction than when the competition is fierce. We recently talked about what that means for the region in 2011 with local transportation officials, and we also got an update on the progress of light rail in Norfolk with Hampton Roads Transit President and CEO Philip Chiquette. Philip Chiquette, a lot has changed since last we talked. I think, right before the IG report came out.
Yes, we did.
On transit. And we knew that a lot of this would be sort of compiled into this report. Wow. And then in early January, news that light rail would not quite make the schedule that you had hoped it would make. Bad day, huh?
Yeah, real bad day for me. That's a painful day. Don't like to miss.
Right. So as you think about the process that led to that, at what point did you say, we're not going to make it, and we just need to own up to that and say this is where it is?
In early December, I said, I've got some serious doubts, in spite of all the schedules you're giving me, that this is doable. We met on January the 6th. We spent an entire day looking at about 700 different items on a schedule, and it was just painfully clear that the safety systems weren't going to be in by the end of February, and without that happening by the end of February, you can't do May.
One thing leads to another. So, I think in your statement you said in the spirit of full disclosure and transparency, after our review today, I know that we will not be able to properly complete all the work necessary. Unfortunately, what I don't know today is when we will be able to open.
And that's not a cop-out. That's a I don't know. As I watch the installation of the safety components and the testing of those, I'll be able to eventually zero in on another day, but that could be sometime between the end of February or the end of April.
As you look at the Midtown, why is that project not closer to reality than it is? It's been something like 14 months. I recognize you're not doing the contract, but it's been 14 months at least we've been noodling around with this thing. Well,
first of all, we're told by the 1st of April that we will have the definitive agreement between VDOT and the concessionaire. And my understanding is the talks are centering around the toll. Right. And right now we're somewhere north of $2 each way and are trying to get that toll down in the $1.50 range. Certainly we have some of these new monies that have come available to us, and hopefully they can be used. But that road needs to get done. It is the most heavily trafficked road, I believe, east of the Mississippi. Two-lane road east of Mississippi. Yep. And it's very important, not only congestion in Hampton Roads, but to our Navy. And again, I believe that the administration understands the importance of that, and I believe that'll be a reality.
Dwight Farmer, as you look at the Midtown in the context of the projects that are on the table, would that be your topmost priority too?
That is one of a couple top priorities that are ready to go projects. That's the key right now. I think we need to deliver, we need to implement. Midtown Tunnel is certainly ready to go with a successful negotiation on the contract and the agreement, and the other is the Dominion Boulevard ready to go. And of course we have a private sector investment in the New Jordan Bridge. So we need to get implementation here.
One of the funded projects in Virginia's new budget is called Patriots Crossing.
It's an extension of what we have been calling the intermodal connector that's actually underway. VDOT has it fully funded. It's about $170 million to take truck traffic directly off of 64 to NIT. And then if you extend on, if you're traveling from Virginia Beach or Chesapeake to the naval base, you can take this intermodal connector as a car. With the Patriots Crossing, you can continue out underneath of the Elizabeth River and then up and come back out at Craney Island, and you have a choice there with the Patriots Crossing. You can either literally hang a left and go down the Craney Island connector to Western Freeway. Trucks can stop in and out at the 4th Marine Terminal that's now under construction. Or you can continue west to near the south portal of the Monitor Merrimack Memorial Bridge Tunnel.
And so the advantage of that would be less expensive?
Well, that component, if VDOT will stay committed to its funding of Intermodal Connector, if the Port Authority will stay committed to some statements that they have made, and I think they would, for $200 or $300 million to do parts of the Craney Island Connector, we're a bit north of $2 billion. That is a doable, financially feasible project at that level. So we could, for a total project of under $3 billion with those commitments, do this improvement. But they are going to need tolls as part of the financing package, if not all of the financing package.
And tolls is the word of the day. We keep hearing
it is.
You got to get ready for this. We've been in a false kind of reality here in this region for a while, not having tolls. Right. Certainly if you drive in the Richmond area, tolls very much a factor of life in the Richmond area. Yeah,
the revenue streams for transportation every day, literally, are being consumed to a larger extent for maintenance. The system is getting a little bigger every once in a while, but it's getting older faster. And what's left for new construction has been really stabilized in some cases, and in some cases dwindling. But it looks like, I think for the nation, not just Hampton Roads, not just Virginia, the nation, tolling is going to be a critical component of most major infrastructure transportation improvement.
The legislation now requires VDOT to accept unsolicited proposals for the project's construction. The Virginia House and Senate also approved the creation of the Virginia Infrastructure Bank. Nearly $3 million will be allotted to that bank to provide grants to local governments and loans to private entities involved in transportation projects. On an editorial roundtable, we dug deeper into the headlines, from a core city facing tough decisions to a local congressman who said the Pentagon is bulldozing. Hugh, you've been covering the issue of Joint Forces Command and what's happening there. By the time this broadcast airs, there will probably be some news out of that, but it looks like we didn't lose as many jobs as we thought we might lose in that scenario.
No, we lost a lot. We're going to lose about 1,900 and so jobs. That's bad. It's about second when it ranks just behind the Ford Motor plant closing in terms of jobs. So it's not good news, but it's not the apocalypse that everyone feared. I mean, at some point there were estimates of 6,000 jobs and then maybe another 4,000 in indirect jobs. So 10,000 jobs being lost, and it was for a while there things really seemed dicey. So I think the delegation feels, well, look, we lost half, but the good news is we saved half. So, and we saved the kinds of jobs in modeling and simulation that are going to maybe help grow the industry a little bit.
And 4th District Congressman Randy Forbes not at all happy with the degree of disclosure and transparency from the Pentagon about how he found out about this, how other legislators found out about this.
Yeah, if there's a downside to this, it really hurt the relationship for a while between the Pentagon and Virginia leaders, from Governor Bob McDonnell down to the whole Virginia delegation. Defense politics is one thing that the Hampton Roads delegation kind of gets along on, whether you're Republican or Democrat. And they felt, first of all, this was announced in August in Washington when no one was in town. There are really no details. There was no rationale given. And things just kind of steamrolled from there. And it took a face-to-face meeting between Secretary Gates, Admiral Mullen, and the Virginia leaders, literally sitting down in a room in Northern Virginia to talk this out. And then that was in November. And by then things seemed to thaw a little bit, and it was generally realized that, well, we're not going to lose as many jobs as we think we are, and things got a little better. But for a while there, things were kind of nasty.
Yeah.
Hugh, do you think that the decision was materially changed, or the number of jobs was materially changed, or was that just greater detail about what was going to happen that came out over time?
I think it might have been greater detail. It was hard to. It was kind of like pinning Jello to the wall, because the first announcement was, we're going to close JeffCom. And then it was, not really going to close it, we're going to disestablish it. That's different. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that we're going to look at each different component of JeffCom and see what's going to be happening to it. So everyone kind of seemed to be in the dark as to what they wanted to do, and this whole thing seemed to be evolving as it went. So It's hard to say whether Secretary Gates changed his mind or whether he really just wanted to take a critical look at downsizing JEFCOM and decided, yeah, after we looked at it too closely, we can't get rid of all this stuff.
One of the things we know that Paul Frame, the mayor of Norfolk, gave his State of the City address, and I love this term that he's talking about, the slow suffocation from traffic congestion. Bill.
Yes. He spent a good portion of his speech talking about traffic, and spoke a lot about light rail, of course, and said that the pains that we're experiencing now are going to be worth it when this thing finally gets on track. He also spoke about the newly dubbed Patriots Crossing, also known as the third crossing, and said that that's going to be a very important aspect to transportation. But his point was, and he closed his speech by saying he talked about a lot of things, but he talked about transportation and then went on to other things, but then closed talking about transportation, saying that Norfolk is dependent on our real property tax values, and if we don't do something about the traffic congestion, then people are going to leave. And he also noted, talking about the census, that for the first time in 40 years, Norfolk saw a population increase during this census.
We also brought you the latest on the Chesapeake Bay cleanup. The Environmental Protection Agency wants to put the bay on a diet, but some localities say they can't afford it. And while the Bay Diet is a victory for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, some local communities claim it's just another unfunded mandate. So we're talking about 12 localities, something like $9.5 billion, Corey, something like that?
Yeah, that's the latest estimate from the state.
I mean, that's an amazing amount of money. Mac McReynolds, York County Administrator, you're the city or the county executive who has the responsibility of managing the money there. What will the impact of this be in York County? Have you had a chance to calculate that?
Yes, we have. And if you were to go with the first estimates we had at $9.8 billion, it would be about a 71% increase in York County's real estate taxes. We'd go from a rate of about 65.75 cents to $1.12. So it'd be a significant impact. And
my guess is you might hear from one or two citizens.
I imagine we would. We already have, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So did you say that's the latest estimate? Or
no, that was the initial estimate.
Yeah.
Now, the latest estimate's down to about $2.5 billion, and that would be only 21% increase, or about 12 cents on the 65.75. So.
I know that localities are stressed. Is this sort of a stand-in-line deal, one more thing that's been ordered by somebody else but not funded?
It is indeed an unfunded mandate, yes. And there are, as I understand it, some bills in Congress that would potentially help, but waiting on a check from Washington these days is not something we're going to be planning on.
You're not going to be standing by the mailbox, I see. Bruce Goodson is the James City County Board of Supervisors vice chair, so you're the elected authority around this. What are you hearing from your constituents?
Well, we're hearing a real concern about the cost, but my concern is that we appropriately bring the responsibility around who it belongs to. I mean, if you look at the original EPA backstops, they only reflected a oversight of 1% in the agriculture community, and clearly 40 to 50% of the problem of the phosphorus and what's going into the bay is coming from agriculture. And so the Virginia plan tries to address that to 40%, but there's really no regulation yet for that. And so farms are going to have some type of buffering or some type of facilities to filter runoff from the farms. And so it's a concern of mine that what's going to happen is they're going to look to the localities where we've got money, we've got the ability to tax our local citizens and offer us opportunities to trade, to take our citizens and pay off farmers, and so that we don't have to have so much of the expense or much of the retrofits in the localities. We're looking at retrofitting so that we're filtering 25% of the landmass in the urban communities. That is these high efficiency BMPs. Basically, BMPs, which are the best management practices. As people go around, they see these pools of water where what happens is the storm water goes into these pools, and then what the BPA and the Virginia plan would have us is to put these facilities in that would filter the runoff. You got to look at other solutions too that might possibly be less expensive. Maybe regulating fertilizer. You know, if we didn't put fertilizer on the land, then it wouldn't have to go into the BMPs to be filtered in the first place. It looks like we go to the easy solutions. The easy solutions are force local governments to filter instead of going back to the real source of the problem, which is of the phosphorus, phosphates, and the fertilizers that go in the land and the farms.
And so, Corey Nealon, what does your reporting tell you? Because I'm guessing when Bruce Goodson says this about, hey, you know, the farms are responsible for most of this, but it's not the farms who are being asked to pick up the tab here. What does your reporting tell you about what how they're reacting?
Well, it seems like nobody really wants to pick up the tab. I mean,
there's a shock.
It's a lot of money, you know. I believe, you know, the Farm Bureau has put out some figures that I think it was something like $800 million for the cost of cattle fence streaming. The Hampton Roads Planning District Commission put out a figure of $680 million per year, which was a worst-case scenario, and they said that. And you know, it's something that's going to cost money for sure. And I think this year the states are going to be working with the localities to really kind of nail down the plans on individual basis and get a better idea of what exactly is going to be done. And then you're going to get to see those costs and really see how much it's going to affect your localities.
So you've been working on this for a long time too, Christy Everett with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. What's your organization's take on what they came up with?
Well, as Corey mentioned, the first Chesapeake Bay Agreement that identifies too much nutrient pollution coming into the bay was in 1983. So we've been talking about this for decades. We know exactly what the problem is. In year 2000, we had the Chesapeake Bay Agreement, and they said, for 10 years, let's try and see if we can do this voluntarily. And then, of course, since 1998, EPA had responsibility under a lawsuit to make the bay fishable and swimmable. It's still not there by 2010, so their responsibility was to say, it's time to go on a diet bay.
Yeah.
You know, I do think we all are going to have to do our part. We can't just point to other people. We've worked hard to try to get from the federal government funding for this, but I don't think we can count on it these days. I do think we need to think about the economic value of the bay, though, and that it really is an investment. If we keep looking the other way, we're going to keep paying for it.
A NASA Langley pioneer paid us a visit on the broadcast. Katherine Johnson is an extraordinary woman whose mathematical skills were so sharp she was known as a human computer. Johnson worked at NASA Langley in Hampton during the 50s, a woman and an African American who broke through barriers and made history all along the way.
Before there was electronic computers to do all the calculations, the NACA used to hire women who had degrees in mathematics. And it was thought that women would do it more accurately and pay more attention to the fine detail, and men wouldn't have the patience to do that. Katherine Johnson worked with the Space Orbital Mechanics branch, and they asked her to calculate, you know, certain times when the rocket would have to fire and when they would launch the spacecraft away from the rocket and where she thought the spacecraft would actually land so they'd be able to recover it.
She always told us that my grandfather, who only went to the 6th grade, was the smartest man she ever saw. And he could do numbers faster than you could bat your eye. So she started out, she said she used to count the plates and the silverware, and so she always loved numbers. And when she went to college, the professor had her and everything he taught her, she was just maxing. And he said, I think you'd make a good math researcher. And she said, well, what's that? He said, well, that's for you to find out. And so that was her dream from the beginning. She said, I want to be a research mathematician.
I think it was your daughter who said they were all good at math, too.
Yes.
Do you think this is, I mean, your father was good at math, you're a genius at math, your children, is this a genetic thing?
Could have been. My mother had been a teacher until she married and moved into the country. I was always around people who were learning something. I liked to learn. I think very often that's missing with kids today. They don't want to learn.
So what do you think is the reason for that? What do we do about that?
I don't know other than constantly say to them, you need to learn how to learn. And then you want to know. So I say that to students everywhere.
Yeah.
You learn if you want to. So you've got to want to learn.
And we wrapped up the 2011 General Assembly session with a roundtable of guests. And while the General Assembly compromised on the state budget, remember it still requires the governor's approval. Governor McDonald will consider if he wants to propose any changes to the budget bill before sending it back to legislators for the April 6th veto session. We'll be sure to keep you up to date on those developments as well. To watch this program again or any of our broadcasts from the past 3 seasons, visit our website, that's whatmatters.tv, or watch us on YouTube. On our website, you'll also find any number of ways to get in touch with us, or you can join us as a fan on Facebook. You can also write to us by way of post. That's 5200 Hampton Boulevard, Norfolk, Virginia, 23508. On the radio dial for more local talk, I hope you'll also join us for Hearsay. That's on 89.5 WHRV FM. We're live each weekday at noon, and we'll take your calls. Thanks again for watching. I'm Kathy Lewis, and we'll see you next time for Season 4 and another look at what matters.